We are going. There we go. All right, let's get officially started, everybody. Um, welcome to our guests. Welcome to our audience. Thank you for joining us tonight at NAWP. We do say NAWP. I always try to do a quick little intro when I host these deals because if every now and then somebody hasn't been part of the NAWP-averse yet. NAWP is not at AWP. It's an acronym that stands for not at AWP. It started as dumb jokes that I was making on Twitter, and then Jared, who's much smarter than me, was making jokes with me also. And he's like, let's make this an actual thing. And long story short, now we've been doing like monthly readings and other coolness, mostly just the monthly readings, but occasionally open mics and things like that. We do call it NAWP instead of NAWP, mostly because for years I just assumed everybody said OP, and I was aghast when I found out that people pronounced it AWP. I'm like, you're missing a golden opportunity. So Jared and I said, let's what's the control what you can control, or write the book you want to read. Like, no, we're going to make an organization, and it's going to sound like YOP. So here we are. Thank you for joining us. This is our all Cleveland show, which is very cool. And we'd be very kind to that because Cleveland has multiple sporting events happening right now, and they're still here to read poems for us. Here at NOP, we usually do our readings in just alphabetical order. So it's going to go Jason Harris. Megan, I've been meaning to ask you, is it Neville?
Neville rhymes with devil, yes.
I assumed as much. And Kevin Risner, thank you all for joining us tonight. I will give each a little intro. This is kind of the overview part. Sorry, I should have said that. I'll give them each a little intro. They'll read for 10 to 15 minutes, somewhere in that range. And then we'll do a little like a kind of Q&A discussion at the end, just kind of free flowing. So those of you in the audience, if you have questions, you'll have a chance to pipe up and ask them. You can always drop them in the chat as they pop up in your brain and you don't want to forget them. All the usual good stuff. We've all done online readings by now, so you know the drill, basically, right? And then I probably should have started with this. I'm Mitch Nobis. Jared and I are the co-founders of NAWP. Coming to you from Metro Detroit, so I'm wildly jealous of our Cleveland readers here tonight because their basketball team is still playing. Sure, they're playing the Celtics, but they're still playing, and they play competitive basketball. So I'm going to just kind of live vicariously through you all, if you don't mind, because if you're not a basketball fan, things got rough in Detroit this year, but it happens to the best of us sometimes. All right. On that note, we are going to start off with Jason. Let me pull up your bio here. Jason Harris is a Black American who currently serves as editor-in-chief for Gordon Square Review. His writing has been published in Hobart, Foundry Journal, Barron Magazine, The Shallow Ends, the Cleveland Review of Books, and more. Most recently, he served as an editor to the forthcoming nature poetry anthology from Kent State University's press, Light Enters the Grove, exploring Cuyahoga Valley National Park through poetry. Quick personal note, I think that sounds really cool. For those interested, you may visit his website, jasonharriswriter.com, and I will try to drop links into the chat as the night goes along. So I will drop that over there in a moment. But first, let me pass the mic to you, Jason. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Mitch. And thank you, everyone who is here this evening. I'm going to be reading some poems from a collection that I wrote called The Animal You Keep. It is an eco-poetic manuscript about me grappling with climate change, nature, and becoming a father. Recommendation for fatherhood. With everything in my body, I trust him to run out for milk or sugar or a bottle of Pinot Noir and come back home. I've heard him sing. His voice isn't beautiful, but he can scrape through classics like Wheels on the Bus or Old MacDonald, the way a rake scrapes over pebbled asphalt. I've been mesmerized, sitting with him, crisscross applesauce, as he reads to me A Little Blue Truck or Knuffle Bunny. My only reservation is that I don't think he cares that he's not been loved the way he deserves to be loved in his boyhood. So please be gentle with him. Not the way you would be with an infant, but gentle as you would be with the rabbits, wounded by a fence so far back we couldn't tell you where it was. This I'll take to the grave, that amongst the maple tree rotting in the backyard, in the unfinished kitchen, we traverse in the moonlight, in the dark, crooked river running through Cleveland, in the lake from which too many bodies are pulled. I let you fall from my arm. My son's name is August, and there are a few poems throughout this collection that are titled simply August, and these are epistolary poems to him. August, you would have laughed at the sight of us turning the camera unto ourselves as we twisted our bodies in grotesque ways to fit the small glass frame to be seen in the best light a ring light could offer. We directed our attention away from smoke. We kept abreast of notifications about deep time and deep funk. We asked for order and demanded chaos. We let days go by without speaking a single word about the sheer number of little fish seagulls pulled from the Cuyahoga River. August, it was a defunct time to be alive. Through the turbulence, though, we held it together. We loved the earth so much that we gambled with our lives just to see it. We flew one person through a seat. We fist fought our neighbors over said seat. Flight attendants would come by with trays of snacks, and we'd oblige because why not? If this plane goes down, we're all dead anyway. We woke up from uncomfortable naps and pointed at clouds we pretended to know the scientific names of. We admired how they made mountains of themselves. Through the turbulence, though, we held each other close. We walked along the lakefront and named all the birds we saw, American robins, blue jays, northern flickers. And though we didn't effectively save the earth, promise we loved it. I promise we lived collectively anxious about the future of it. The earth, that is. August, if there's anything I ever teach you, let it be that we do not learn from history, but are a part of it. August, promise we were human. I promise we thought of you, the you that is. We put forth our best efforts, and yet we wanted not only to visit the moon, but to inhabit it. Because why not? We sent robots to Mars. We died in the name of space exploration because why not? We watched the spacecraft disintegrate on live TV. We stuffed the mouth of the atmosphere with greenhouse gases. We wanted and wanted and wanted until there was nothing left to want. You could have seen it, the way the Cuyahoga River turned itself into a mirror. You too would have loved it. You too would have pulled out a cell phone to capture the reflection of a swarm of seagulls in the slow bend of the water. August, I promised we thought of you. I promised we love the earth. The next two poems are erasure poems that I manipulated into from Christine Guerin's book, The Piercing. And this first poem is called Polaroid. Bits of glitter in the hollow of portrait, the orange still there, the rest yellowing garbage, there willow swings wasted. The apple tree, a hazel tree, a mulberry, unkempt grass, barely visible animals, the radio tower, the flat field. I listened, thick announcements, muted the release. And now moving back to some original work. This is called The Ancient Sea. Remind me to tell you about the pedestrian bridge arched over the tributary that flows into the Cuyahoga River. Remind me to have you guess the number of people who walked over the bridge, forest bathing, in wide brimmed hats and lightweight long sleeve shirts and SPF 15 sunlights. There's the test of the earth like daggers. It was your feet I wanted to step into the 9 mile corridor with and obstruct the tadpole's lateral undulations downstream. It was your gloved hand I wanted on the other side of the rusted buggy I pulled from the current. Had you been there, I would have yelled snake. I would have yelled deer. I would have yelled cardinal. Story has it that all of this, the bowl of the creek I stood in without you, the bank of the creek I wished to have followed you down, the landscape we have carved and sliced and gutted used to be underwater. And my penultimate poem is called Coliseum. And so, what if the human heart is an iceberg, quietly slipping, quietly beneath blue water of everything that hurts about being here with all of you at this magnificent hour and this magnificent light? For so long now, I've been consumed with the act of dying. How it takes a certain kind of flexibility to perform it, a certain kind of memory to recall one's lines in the dark. Do you think dying feels like what it feels like to watch an iceberg detach from the vessel of itself in wide open coliseum of the ocean? Can you imagine that kind of expansiveness? To be given all that room to make your final exit, one the anxious crowd will remember, will rave on about to their children and grandchildren. And my final piece is called Today is as good a day as any other. For love, so I choose love. I lay my head on your mother's belly. I swear I can hear you clearing your little throat. Say, how many days until you are here? How many days until you are here with us among the mayflies, making their way toward land, toward home? Thank you.
Jason, thank you so much. That was amazing. Those you got to check out the comments when you get a chance. The epistolary poems. That was I want more. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, wow, wow, wow. Right. I mean, that kind of says it all. That was fantastic. One moment, whichever one of my children is banging on the door, I'll be with you in a minute. What was it like 10 minutes ago? He said like your writer bio could just say like I have kids. You know, I have kids, so it's always a bit of a building the airplane mid-flight to go back to the airplane image. All right, Megan is up next. Megan Neville is a writer and educator based in Cleveland, Ohio. She has won the Trio Award and the Wick Poetry Center Contest for Peace and Transformation, and has been a finalist or semifinalist for the Write Bloody Book Contest, the Akron Poetry Prize, the Frost Place Chapbook Contest, the Tupelo Press Sunken Garden Chapbook Contest, the SCS Books Open Reading Period, and others. She has earned multiple Best of the Net and Pushcart Prize nominations. Her poetry collection, The Fallow, is available from Trio House Press. Find Megan on Twitter at Megnev, and I will again drop a link to her book in the chat in a moment. Megan, take it away. The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's so great to see a lot of familiar names and faces and things like that. So I'm gonna kind of bookend this with newer things that I'm working on, and then in the middle I'll throw in some some things from the Fallow or, my older chapbook. And I'm definitely going to start with this one poem because completely out of nowhere, and this is how cool the universe works sometimes, Jason kind of used a very similar image in one of those last poems he read, to what this one starts with. So I'm going to start with this one. This is a newer poem that I've been working on. It's called "And Bones of Sunken Ships Still Ache in Her Belly Like Babies Never Had." My neighborhood once held its breath at the bottom of a great lake. Ask the foxglove grabbing skyward from its bed beneath my window. Back then, the water was saline, and some nights I feel its salty ghost swallowing me. Each dawn, I check the north horizon, count steps from my door to see if the tide has crept any closer, if she's coming home. But tourists ooh and awe at the violence of the falls where she's emptying herself to the east. All that's her is just passing through. What else can be expected of a body perched above caverns clutching history? You'd want to get away too. Hard-hatted men sink beneath the waves, beneath the earth, and mine crystals to scrape the roofs of our mouths, melt on our tongues, and make us thirsty for what we lack. So that's my little Lake Erie poem I've been working on. And then I'm going to read a couple things from the Fallow that I don't usually read read aloud because so much of the way it's arranged on the page is important, but I'm just going to give it a try and see if it works. And if it doesn't, my deepest apologies. Okay. This one is called "Sitting on the Floor in the Dark. My student asks if we have always done this." It is right and proper to begin this with a flower or a bird. Petals and feathers direct us how to feel. Well, crocuses were teething, tulips trying out their legs. Robins shat on rich kids' cars as comfort cooed through hallways, groping propped open doors and deviants seeking an escape to smoke. These recollections signal it was spring and a very different time. Papers tugged at tape, binding them to bricks. Meat patty sweat and tater tot salt thickened cafeteria air. What I want to say is we were in school. What I want to say is it was late April. What I want to say is afterwards, trench coats were banned indefinitely. A year earlier, hunters had pulled an alarm herding prey into their range. Ninth period the next day, we had a scheduled fire drill. All looked, none moved toward the door. But I am thinking too much when I should be feeling that very statement a thought. The lingering of presence, the heaviness of want, the nearness of our freedom. You expect, I'll say, we could taste it. My father visited the restaurant where I was working an evening shift. Kids were hanging from windows, he said. My God, it could have been you. I wondered which end of the gun he meant. He asked if I'd please come home that night. I spent it with friends in their basement instead, and the next, and the next, and the next. Gas dropped down to 95 cents that summer, so we drove and drove and drove just to keep moving, to keep up with the moving, to move away, and the flowers lost their edges as we passed. And then, so that's my 1999 poem there. For those of us who were, around then. All right, so next one to change the mood a little bit. This is called "Self-Portrait as Faked Orgasms." You'd think someone would have checked for a pulse. Turns out no, a body is all they want. The first time, yes, on a blood-stained carpet. The wedding night, yes, almond cake in my hair. The night it happened 4 times, each time. Elevator, kitchen counter, both times on the roof, and I know what you're thinking. Why act to make men feel adept? And I am here to tell you, it was not just for the men. I'd learned it was a thing at 9 from a Cosmo in a waiting room. It sounded powerful, bright art or light. If now you're wondering, did she ever fake with me? The answer is yes, and I'd apologize, but that would be one more. I know someone faked with me long ago, and unhurt, I played along. How could I not when her hair smelled like summer spent outdoors? Experts are concerned the internet is teaching everyone performance. The truth is, we already know. And by the way, I can only watch porn with the sound turned down because I can't stand all of the faking. All right, and then this one is called Elegy with Apologies to Leon Jacobovitz James, who, according to the internet at least, was a psychologist who coined the term semantic satiation. So, 6 feet away, a girl asks, do I know a term for saying a word until it loses ground, becomes a different thing, a bubble on the tongue? And I am sorry to tell her, no, there is no word in English, but in fact there is, and it is grief. 5 years I've driven an automatic, yet when someone cuts me off, I still attempt to downshift. And every night, I should have called my dad today. And then I remember, oh, he's a concept, not a thing. This tearing, peeling, coring, like a placenta detaching after birth, and I've forgotten the lower half of my face. I first learned flirting watching my mother sweat and call priests their given names, most of which meant grief. Just because I sense it with my tongue doesn't mean it's flavor. An exhalation of locusts, my babies with bones on their outside, and I'd rather stab than bludgeon, the blade slick and tight. Laughing on screens, everyone's eyes take dark. You, all organs of mine, watch. Halley's Comet will return, and I want to live that long. In my first look, it was a fuzz of light through the lens, but it's come into focus now as grief. I wait like it is the second coming of a god I could lick and grab, and this waiting also is called grief. I'm so desperate to find satisfaction that I Googled it, and all the search turned up was grief. Say it over and over with eardrums wanting sharper strikes, the mouth's musculature fighting free as teeth erode to ether. And then a short little one. There are a bunch of poems in this book that are Our Lady of, fill in the blank, raised Catholic, what can I say? Shout out to a few of you in there. I see we're also the same. Oh, hello, dog. Oh, your dog is so cute. I love your dog. She appears to love you, or he appears to love you too. All right, so short poem. This one is called Our Lady of the Fallow. Use the phrase let down, like I know what it is to cry milk through the front of my shirt. Latch as a closing off or holding in, depends which side you're on. At 40, I switched to past tense, from I don't have children to I didn't. It's none of your business, really, but my ovaries carry such inheritance, they each need a therapist of their own. In a parking lot, I think a seagull is a baby and go searching for it. Later at home, I hear the baby and think it's nothing, just a seagull, and scatter bread scraps on the ground. And then I think I'll do just one more quick one from here, and then I'll wrap it up with a new one. This one is called Legacy. And it's, I think of this as a link to like the past in a lot of ways, but obviously when you think about all the things going on in the world and right in our backyards even, I think this kind of relates to a lot of that as well. Okay, so this is called Legacy. You know the photo, the one of the young woman with a scarf and dark hair crouching over what used to be a student, screaming why. hands plunging into the low atmosphere as if she can grab her God's shoulders and shake him for letting this happen. But you don't know the man in plaid over her left shoulder. You don't know his class had been dismissed early to participate in democracy. He is too far away and indistinct for you to see the thick glasses, the mustache he still wore 40 years later. You don't know that a decade after the National Guard almost shot him too, he would become my father. Daffodils remain silent, but not complicit. They're still suffering shock. Flowers planted in gun barrels, tear gas tossed back at uniforms. Shoots of yellow flowers from my baptism poke through early May soil. Okay. And then, all right, last one, we'll wrap it up. This is one that's kind of in the works, but for now it's titled Not Another Divorce Poem. When I left my husband, Mom asked for Grandma's ring back, like inheritance can be reversed. Ha, I wouldn't waste such a gift on platinum. When I get an alimony payment, my money app calls it refund, and maybe I should too. Copper has healing powers, I remember, as Mom fights Grandma's dead knuckles for more rings to remember her by. Most evenings, I eat dinner standing at the kitchen counter, despite owning a perfectly nice table. I do this because sitting alone with dishes and silverware feels wrong. Not that it reminds me I have no one to share this meal with, more that it reminds me of how Dad spent his last 20 years with no one to share a meal with. Takeout on his lap, ball game on TV, crumbs speckling the living room floor in front of his favorite easy chair, though he didn't do much living, and none of it was easy. Mom had left him, and I hated her for it. Now I've left too, and hate her even more. This space within me, lurking all those years while I thought I'd live the American dream of staying after everyone else left. That's it. Thank you.
I think I said this in the comment like 3 times already, but damn. It was amazing. Megan, thank you so much. That was fantastic. The fingers and knuckles image was like instantly burned into my brain. In a good way. You know what I mean. We're all writers here. You know what I mean. Oh wow. Okay. Yes, Megan, fantastic. That sums it up. Kevin is up next. Let me pull up your bio here, Kevin. Here we go. Kevin A. Risner lives in the Cleveland area and is the author of multiple poetry chapbooks, including Do Us a Favor from Variant Literature. And you thought this was just going to be about Cleveland, didn't you? From Ghost City Press. His debut full length, There's No Future Where We Don't Have Fire, comes out from ELJ Editions in 2025. His work can be found or is forthcoming in Glass, Gordon Square Review, Great Lakes Review, Major 7th Magazine, Midway Journal, the Ocean State Review, Thimble Literary, and elsewhere. And again, I will drop a couple of links into the chat for Kevin's stuff. Kevin, I toss the microphone over to you.
All right, awesome. All right, thank you, Mitch. Thank you, everyone, for sitting around and listening to some awesome poems. And trying to avoid all basketball stuff for at least an hour. If you are paying attention to basketball, which maybe a few of you are, but a few of you aren't. Anyway, I'm going to do a couple poems first from Do Us a Favor, and then do a few from my mini chapbook. You thought this was just going to be about Cleveland, didn't you? And then a few new poems from the upcoming collection. Just go chronologically because I think that, at least for me, makes the most sense. So the first poem I'm going to read, let me get this up, the newest version of it. So the title is You Had Your Soul With You, and it takes some lyrics from the same song by the National, it's Something that I do a lot. I have a lot of after the national poems just because I'm obsessed with the band and have been for like 15 years. So 15 or more. So yeah. So let's get started. You had your soul with you. Mine is hanging on the flagpole as the temperature reached 90 degrees for 3 days straight. Again. You have no idea how hard I died when you left. The back seat is lined with towels, dried leaves on the floor, towers of library books I haven't read, never will. Where does everyone go for respite these days? Into the woods, hidden in smog, sitting at the bar with a beer and a glass to inspect the counter for hidden grime. There is always a recounting of the past decade. I was in no mood to hear this back then. Sometimes now, maybe later. Strings of lyrics pause in the sky, wait for change that's never going to come. I'm carried to space by a dolphin balloon. It pops, and that's when I return to a voice snaking in the silence right before sleep, in the pain, in the middle of a fork in the road, at a wrong turn. There's heartbreaking truth in the raspiest of voices. Love submerged with an underwater chorus. Vibrating light emanates from our chests, and I gasp as this next song pauses at the bridge. It crawls and peeks over the edge into the river. So maybe souls can be moved here at the end of everything. All right, and I'm going to read this one. And it's titled Press Hand. A lot of the prose poems in Do Us a Favor have the title and it kind of flows into the actual poem. So sometimes it was really easy to kind of get that title sounding good, and I think this one was kind of difficult. So anyway, press hand against the pane, peak below. Ocean sinks into shoreline sand. Imagine feet sticking inside and tunneling for cool pockets, hiding like clams in noontime heat. To soar means to ingest the chill of the atmosphere, the boundary between oneself and ice crystals in the sky. A pinprick thousands of feet away from solidity. Knowing how small one truly is a revelation in these ascending minutes. Boxed in with metal all around us. Upon descent, the view becomes a shroud. The jolts remind me that nothing is ever certain. The climb toward maturity feels identical. As a 7-year-old, one thinks those at a higher age are all-knowing. At 30 and beyond, I laugh. At all of these snapshots of the 90s, I don't wonder anymore about the future, about wisdom, about much of anything anymore. And I'm going to read one more. This one kind of has a similar kind of vibe, a lot about kind of our fragility and kind of our kind of the speck of time we're here on the earth. Tonight is the night to look at the sky. Find targets. Meteors zip into deepest black, act as laser pointers. I want to pounce on them. I never catch them in time. A new life appears. Soon it's gone out of existence, much like mayflies along the lake rest on white walls of houses one morning, then crunched underfoot in the darkness later that evening. I shake more when I sit still. Breath pours out onto polished surfaces. My whole self wipes blank during the endless winter months. When Betelgeuse explodes in the sky, it will have already been gone for ages. Now I'm under the covers, embroidered, eyes wide open, seeing nothing and everything all at once. Matter in front of me morphs into flickering flame, touches my tongue so I can say what no one else understands. It's another language that whispers good night in this not so distant space. Warmth spreads through my veins. Comets are not ice any longer, but indestructible fire. All right. And I'm going to read one or two poems from the mini chat book, which you all can check out. It was part of Go City Press's summer reading series. And I'm trying to remember which year. 2022. And I'm going to read this one. If anyone knows the landscape of Cleveland, we have a lot of bridges that are just kind of like in midair, right along the Cuyahoga. And so this one is kind of in tribute to them a little bit. The title of this is called They're Called Bascule Bridges, which I didn't know until like maybe 5 or 6 years ago. They're called Bascule Bridges. The hottest temperature in Cleveland was 104 in 1988. In my family's red Toyota, arcing over the Brown River, the road keeps crumbling. Every decade, turn to the right, and you see them. Two leaning metal towers with maws open, Cleveland's version of Cerberus. The beasts allow ships to pass through, but sometimes not. The surface always ready to catch fire. Tires skid over rumble strips, vehicles dead set to scuff every morning. Roasting in that van, it makes a trajectory to golden haze. The monsters roar flames at one another, stand guard as the path rushes past them into downtown, where steam belches from far below. A new world heaves up, its fingers to draw us all in, to pull the sun closer. See, where are we at? I think I'm going to skip ahead and do some new stuff, just because of time constraints. So my upcoming chapbook, my full length, There's No Future Where We Don't Have Fire, explores a lot about some very familiar topics to all of us, to all of the poets here, and that is climate change. I'm going to begin with the opening poem to this collection, which is very, very short, but it sort of sums up the vibe a little bit. All right, so let me get this pulled up. The title is Savior. I saved a beetle only for it to be consumed by a frog. Okay, that's it. All right, I'm gonna go and continue on with another short poem here titled Perfection. We had it. We did at one time before nature fell with their shadows dropping down across our path. We saw the farthest we could to the east, an empty liquid world that soon would rise up to eat hotels that ate the forests. When dinner was finished, dessert was a string of palm trees, always in the way. They are all always in the damn way. All right, I'm going to read this poem. And let me give a tiny bit of background to this one. So, what was it? I think was it 2 years ago now? There was, trying to remember where I put all of this information. So, so there's a quote that I put at the start of this poem, and it's written by Rob Garner, who works at NASA, and talks a little bit about this article that he wrote, talks a little bit about the James Webb Space Telescope, which showed us sort of the deepest infrared images of the universe. And so this poem is sort of came about after got to see those images. So the title here is Just a Speck Talking Here. And let me read the first quote. This slice of the vast universe covers a patch of sky approximately the size of a grain of sand, held at arm's length by someone on the ground. I am a speck counting on living many more years. There's no better time than now to visit Saturn, skate on the rings like I've been doing this forever. I'll fasten tennis rackets to my feet so I'm ready for the next big snowstorm. But I am never prepared to face the worst of January's polar plunges. We're lucky to catch something so far away from 4 billion years ago, and it's like it's here now, but it's not. I walk away from telescopes, fearful of the reality I might see as I peek closer to that little dot up there. Each one is a galaxy. What I see after sunset never really exists in the present day, and I never forgot that information as a kid. But I'm still giddy for the first blink of a firefly, and as Venus appears right before the sky is purple. It paints my universe with a sea of stars, and it grants me everlasting life. Okay, let me go to some of the latter poems. I'll read two more. The first one is actually published by Voicemail Poems initially, which is really cool. Collection of work where you call this number and then you leave a voicemail, and that's the poem. So, so yeah, if you ever search for that and search for this poem, you can hear me read it, which is kind of cool. The title is Sunset Before the Apocalypse. And this one was inspired by the wonderful clouds of smog and haze that we got to experience over on the East Coast after the Canadian wildfires last year. It was a lot of fun. Sunset before the apocalypse. I see it as the most natural thing in the summer. Find a hazy orb that floats in that thickness until it gets too heavy and it slides away from us. Before that happens, there is still time to catch the lake breeze, notice kids making a future home in the sand. The laughs surrounding barbecues and the sizzles of burgers make innocence climb up from the depths of sage and warm words with friends. We know it will be bad when we wake up tomorrow. The sky will already have melted away. Our civilization scrubbed clean by smog and smoke. What do we have to breathe for now, when every single memory is buried and silence is all we have left? And the last poem I'm going to read is titled, I just lost it, unfortunately. Now That I Don't Run Around Barefoot. That's another prose poem. And it's a little, it starts off a little bit bleak, but then it gets a little bit optimistic, which is nice because it doesn't always happen with some of these poems. Now that I don't run around barefoot. I wrap my arms around red maples, want to know their age and how long they stood before I was a thought. I fear two words, severe weather, because those trees I love will snap and lose much of themselves with a simple gust. Less than 10 seconds, and that's that. One haunting noise can wreck a fence, or the arborvitae I planted, or the roof, or me. That's just it, right? I own something, and I'm afraid of it being destroyed. I never worried in 2010. The downpours, the thunder, the heartbeats after hearing a tornado siren. It wouldn't amount to anything in the end. We meandered around the lawn the other day, heat beginning to bloom, sky a shocking blue, and the birds reminding me I don't have to worry about a thing. And you know, they're right. Thank you.
Bravo. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you all three. Again, Jason, Megan, Kevin, thank all of you. And saying your names like that, I just realized it kind of rhymed. Jason, Megan, Kevin. That's another act of kismet or synchronicity right there. Thank you, all three of you. Those were fantastic. And as it seems, I like how you a couple of different times each of you kind of mentioned like the way that these play off each other a little bit too. Sometimes readings like it's almost like you've been to like a rock and roll show. It's like a punk rock group, but then like a soul group, and then a ska group, and it's like this is cool, but they're like so disjunctured. Like I'm all over the place, but like those all flowed so well together. Like I guess. Well, I'm going to ask a question. So real quick pause. Welcome to the Q&A part. Audience members, if you have any questions, maybe just drop a thing in the chat so I can see that you have a question. Then feel free to just unmute and ask it. Or if you're shy or multitasking, just drop the question in the chat and we'll get it there. But I do want to start us off because I was just rambling out loud and it kind of became a question in my mind. We were making kind of jokes, observations in the chat about like Lake Erie popping up multiple times, and just kind of like Midwestern vibes popping up in different ways throughout. And also kind of like the fragility and shortness of life was also like there were several themes among all three of you and the poems you each shared. So I was just kind of throw it out as a question, like how do you think the Cleveland area or the lake or what's feeding and like what's the influence here? I'll simplify it. How is the Cleveland area feeding into your work? Is it not? How would you think about that? Feel free to expound because I think it goes other ways too, but we'll just start with Cleveland. Oh, and by the way, while Kevin was reading, my 14-year-old texted me to let me know y'all are tied at halftime.
That's awesome.
I
Oh,
should
that
have
was
led with that.
unexpected.
No, that was a
totally
happy
gonna-
laugh. That was a very pleasantly surprised laugh.
I should have led with that. Like he had to let me know. I was like, Dad, I'm sorry, but
Tell him we said thank you. We appreciate him.
I will.
So yeah, I'll start with this one if you guys don't mind. Cleveland pervades like everything, and just the whole Rust Belt aesthetic sort of pervades everything. I didn't grow up in Cleveland. I grew up down in Mahoning County, so like halfway to Pittsburgh. For those of you not familiar with the area, but my dad had grown up in Cleveland. So for me, Cleveland is a link to my past. Because my dad had told me stories about, growing up here in the, the 50s and 60s and, things like that. And so it's definitely linked to my past. And obviously, everyone's roots feed into their writing. And then it also, I know this might sound strange to people from some places, but it's an aspirational thing for me because, like many angsty teenagers, I wanted nothing more than to get away from where I was from. And, Cleveland was kind of like a happy medium where I could, be close enough to home, but still, get to do all the cool things that, Cleveland has to offer. Because I know people knock Cleveland a lot, but, we've got a world-class orchestra, we've got a great food scene, we've got multiple professional sports teams, we've got, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, we've got the great metro parks that, Jason, I'll give a shout out to that book he edited again, about that kind of stuff. It just, you have to try to love Cleveland. You have to look, but like there are things there to love, beyond like what everybody assumes about it. And I think that is the main thing, because so much of writing is about knowing what to look for and to notice things that other people don't notice. And I think loving Cleveland is based on that exact same concept, if that makes sense.
I mean, I'm a
So
metro, so yes. Go ahead.
I'll take it sort of in the opposite direction from Megan. Like Megan, I did not grow up here. I grew up in West Virginia. I was born and raised there. I moved here after I graduated from Marshall University, and Cleveland has since become a link to my present. It's where I met my wife. It's where we had a child, and so much of my present life is lived in Cleveland. But with that, I've also met fascinating people here who have helped me better understand who I am as a person, as a writer, as an editor. And it's almost like when I wake up and I look out the window, or if I sit down to write, um, it's like second nature to talk about Cleveland, because I'm always looking for, like Megan said, what is often overlooked when you are in Cleveland, or when you're looking at the USA on the world stage. There's a lot of jokes to be said about Cleveland, but I think when you get down to the root and the truth of what Cleveland is, what it can be, there's so much potential. Um, and there's so many great writers here, that I feel like it's just something that I want to have within my literary legacy. Is Jason lived in and wrote about Cleveland. Um, Also, I think that with Lake Erie, or with the Cuyahoga River, those are sort of our staples. Sort of like you have your New York poems, and when you have your New York poems, there's always going to be like a train, or a, a city bus, or Central Park. Those staples. And I think for us, we have these ecological beauties or disasters, however you want to look at them. Um, and for me, that's what draws me to write about Cleveland.
Yeah, and I'll just add a little bit more. So for me, I mean, I was born here, spent most of all my childhood here. Then I went abroad for a few years, then came back, went to Toledo for my master's, and then am now back in the Cleveland area. So I've spent majority of my life here. And a lot of the people that I care about live here. So my parents, my wife, and a lot of my good friends are still in the area. So there is a really strong connection, I think, to, people within this space. And a lot of the poems that I have put together involve these people, as well as memories from childhood, um, whether good or bad, and I think that in and of itself kind of are the most evident things, but then kind of reckoning with how um, we as a city are not only kind of affecting our own communities, but also nature as a whole, I think is something that I really want to focus on. And I think a lot of my work focuses on, just because um, no matter where you are in the world, it's not going to get any easier. And so kind of, you know, I think kind of trying to see kind of what we're doing and then how we can kind of make everything better, not for ourselves, but for one another, I think is really big. Oh,
Those were all great answers. Sorry, I'm reading. We got a question in the chat. I was just skimming. Let me just read this out loud, because I think there's a question or two embedded in here. So Alex asks, so a lot of people think that the fresh water of the Great Lakes is where everyone in the US is going to want to be when climate change gets terrible. More like Erie questions. Yeah, I haven't beleaguered an unaccepted poem about that myself. The eco poems you guys read, as climate change poems often are, feel somewhat dire about climate change, albeit beautiful and beautifully written. Do you find a lot of hope in your direct environment too? Are those poems of hope for the future harder to write when there's so much destruction happening worldwide? Is that ever like one of the questions of the moment? Yeah, great question. Thanks, Al. They're thinking that was a big question.
That's okay. I was waiting to see if anybody else hopped in first. But no, thank you for that question, because I think it's funny, because I think the actual question parts of that are things that I wrestle with every single day, um, especially days when I write, because I'm always thinking, okay, I'm talking about my little world, when my little world is absolutely nothing, in the face of what other people are dealing with. But then, climate change is obviously one of the things that affects all of us, to some extent or another. Obviously some people way more than others, but the fact that, as Alex said, we are right. I mean, I can walk out my front door and look down the street and see Lake Erie from where I am right now. And, knowing that that is sort of a hypothetical salvation to a lot of people, it makes me think about, and a lot of writers write about this kind of thing, where are we all going to go when, everything goes to shit that, or more so that, to absolute shit, basically. And some people, theorize the Great Lakes. So it absolutely gives a sense of hope amidst all of that. But it also kind of provides this almost apocalyptic backdrop that, like, because it makes you conscious of that, like, oh, this is a place that some people think they're going to retreat to when, when the world ends, or whatever. um so for the are those poems of hope for the future harder to write when there's so much destruction happening worldwide? I'm just going to answer that with a yes. Yeah. And wondering, to what extent do I have a right to be writing about those things when they don't affect me as much as they affect other people? And then at the same time, do I have a responsibility to acknowledge such things, because, even though they don't? So that's obviously something I think about a lot.
Really brief. What this question is such a good question, Alex, and for me, because I think about that a lot, because I feel like my poems are hopeful. Um, and I don't do it intentionally, but I think as a person, hope for me is an act of empathy for the future. Um, and when I think about, the next 5, 10, 15 years, um, and what will the world be like for August? He's only 1.5 at the moment, but I want it to be a better place, and I have to have that hope for him that it is, um, because I feel like if I stop hoping, then I've given up trying to take care of um, the space that I can take care of for him. Before him, um, I may have been a really hopeless person. Since him, I think I've become a lot more hopeful. Um, it's because I want better for him than what we have, even though I know realistically it likely won't be that much better, or it'll be about the same. Um, yeah, for me, it's hope is an act of faith that things are going to get better. Um, and I'm hoping towards that empathy for a better place, better environment for younger people.
I think that's where I'm kind of looking at it, is kind of clinging to it because I want there to be this the hope for the younger people as well, people younger than me, And I just see it a lot where there isn't that, a lot of people with a lot of people. Um and so yeah, I'm trying to kind of get that there with a lot of my work because a lot of it is kind of looking at what's happening and kind of relaying what's happening and wondering what the hell's going on, like, and then like just hearing people, you know, again, these are polls from news sources and stuff, but just hearing, that a large percentage of Americans aren't even concerned much about climate change at the present time. And I'm like, well, I mean, obviously there are so many other things happening in the world, right? Really horrible things. But this is another thing that really we should be focusing on too, apart from, all of the atrocities that are taking place. So I need to have that hope as well because I feel as I am writing, um, if I don't have it somehow there, at least in my line of sight, then it, it, I'd be going into a darker place, I think, either with my thoughts or just with what I'm putting together.
Yeah, and also I would just add that all great answers, and I would add shout out to teachers. Many of us in this room are or have been English teachers, and empathy is popping up in the chat now too. Like this is essentially why we read, right? I mean, it's why we write and read. it's to help us with that empathy. All right, we have one more question. Carla has raised a hand.
I'd like to take this in a different direction because I've been reading a lot of Blake, who is also a city person writing often about nature and radicalism. But mostly when you read Blake, you're thinking about music and sound. So and I heard a lot of different approaches to music and sound in your poems. So I'd love to hear each of you talk about how you think about sound and the musicality of the poem.
For me, in the earlier drafts, I'm not really thinking about it, and it's not because I'm not careful with it, but it's in like maybe the fifth or sixth draft when I really start to read the poem aloud, and I listen to my breath. I listen to those natural pauses. If I stumble over words, then that's a sign for me that the musicality, the sound is not where it should be or could be. Um, and I go back and I learned this from um, a writer. I can't remember his name at the moment. He taught us about going through and counting your syllables. He taught us about uh, assonance and consonants, and just taking time out of your day to just write words that rhyme, um, both with vowels, with consonants, without any hope of making it sound logical. And I've noticed that when I sit down to write and edit, it's easier for me to pull words together that are similar because I know that a part of that music for me comes from the act of reading and breathing through the sentence or the line. So I don't stick as hard to like the nitty gritty fine tools of sound and rhythm and all that good stuff because I try to do it more naturally.
To build on that, though, I think I think in the natural rhythm of human speech, and I mean, you totally hear it, like when, Jason or Kevin or anybody are reading their poems and their voices embody those poems. I think there's, a lot of times we think that we're not using something. I mean, like you said, you're intentional with it, but at the same time, people often think that there's something somehow less, when you're not foregrounding like okay, this is the kind of meter I'm using, or I want to use this kind of internal rhyme here and, end rhyme here and, things like that. It's funny, I teach high school students and so many of them are like, poems have to rhyme, and those are the same kids who say, I hate poems and I don't understand poems. So I'm like, well, maybe if you weren't paying so much attention to just that stuff and just notice the beauty of the cadence of, a human being's voice as they read a poem, then that's, not what you do. But one of my teachers, which feels weird to say now because she's the poet laureate, so it sounds like I'm name dropping, but one of my poetry teachers, Ada Limon, she told us in a workshop I took with her that she cannot write in public. Like she can't go to a coffee shop and sit and write because she can't write without speaking out loud. And I had never thought of it before, but when she said that, I was like, oh my God, I do the same thing. Like I find myself like kind of muttering, because I need to like feel not even so much what it sounds like, but what it feels like in my mouth. So I think, as much as we play with punctuation and we play with word choices and things, I think it's not so much a conscious, okay, I want it to have this many syllables or I want it to have this kind of, accent pattern or anything. It's just what feels good, and what, I hate this word. I call this the F word in my classroom, but what flows, So, yeah, I think there's a lot of joy in writing with sound, Carla. I think so. I love your question. I think there's a lot of joy in the playing with sound. So it's definitely part of my writing process.
Yeah, for me, it's later on. Usually when I'm just getting words onto paper and thinking of ideas, it just kind of falls there and I kind of then play around with things. And usually after I kind of have a draft, I kind of set it aside. And when I return to it, that's when I speak it out loud. So those editing moments are when I kind of say it out loud and kind of hear what it sounds like. And then I know like, okay, this sounds good. Or, ooh, whoa, that is totally not, doesn't have that nice, I don't know, assonance or anything like that. So yeah, I think, yeah, there's definitely, I love the idea of playing with words. And to be honest, over the past month when I've been kind of looking at all the prompts online, and trying to kind of get myself back into writing a little bit, kind of the formal nature of a lot of the types of poems that exist, like villanelles and everything like that, you have to try much harder to kind of explore that in the process versus waiting until later to kind of go to it. So I kind of do like the idea of playing with sound during the initial drafting, but typically I don't really kind of do that much at the beginning. But just to kind of add a little bit more to kind of.
Those are really interesting answers, and you all answered it really differently. And you're all, I must say, using music in your poems very differently. So.
Thanks for chiming in, Carla. That was a fantastic question. And a lot of, I thank you all for like bringing up the fun too. Many of you guys have interacted with Aaron Birch on Twitter. He and I have joked with each other a number of times. Like people always act like writing is painful. Like, oh, I've got to go write today. Like, are you kidding me? This is a blast. Like, why else would you do it? It's fun. It's painful. It's everything, right? But it's also fun. Words, sounds are neat. Like, let's go play. All right.
Introduce a hopeful element into the environmental discussion, because I've been writing a series of poems about the early environmentalist and artist Everett Roos, who disappeared in Escalante Canyon. And so I've been doing research on a bunch of stuff in the area, and I learned that the once vanished Glen Canyon that we thought had been lost by the awful damming and the artificial Lake Powell has reemerged. There's life on it, there are animals on it, because Lake Powell is now shrinking. And so the canyon that we thought was lost, and I'm part of the Glen Canyon Institute, or I give to the Glen Canyon Institute, has actually reemerged with actual like ferns and lizards, and you can see it. And I thought, you know what? Everything you think is gone may come back. So I did want to.
My very dark answer on hoping climate is that the world's not going to end. Like everybody's like, oh, the world's ending. Like, nope, it's not. We just might not be along for the ride, but the world will continue on. Those guys
are going anywhere. The water problem. I mean, the history of the West is the history of water, and there are a lot of bad decisions been made. But this is a big fight. But for those of us who have been thinking about Glen Canyon, I was kind of amazed when I saw the reemergence of the canyon. That's fantastic. People are now hiking it again.
That is very cool. All right. Thank you all for joining us tonight. This was fantastic. I'm sorry you had to miss the first half, basketball fans, but I can't imagine a better reason why to miss the first half of the basketball game. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you again, Jason, Megan, and Kevin, for your wonderful words tonight. Thank you, audience, for great questions and making a great room. This was really a pleasure. It's been a long week, and this is a great way to pre-weekend. I know we still have one more day of work, but pre-weekend we'll call it. All right. Thank you all. Take care. We'll see you next time.
This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
And you're going to send an email with everybody's links to their books and everything?
It's in the chat, but I will try to like tweet that again out tomorrow. Or I think through Eventbrite, Jared has everybody's emails maybe. So yeah, we could try that too.
Okay. Okay. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Go Cavs. Woo.
Yeah. Oh, and Mitch, I meant to say that earlier. Thank you so much for orchestrating all of this and, keeping the family at bay, behind the door.
Sorry about that.
I know I'm like picturing that little door over in the corner, like, you know, keeping your children and everything, just like
It's like the worst.
pacing tigers, you know.
No, and it's such a messy place to do all this stuff, but I've always kind of tempted to leave it open because it's also got the humongous Star Wars Rebels on it, you know. So it's like kind of sums up my family in a nutshell, I think.
That cracks me up. No, I love it when you tweet about your family. There's obviously so much joy in your house, so that's a really cool thing. So
That's it's like the opposite of poetry, right? Like I only talk about the joy instead of like
yeah.
the writing.
Well, as we all do a little bit of that.
Both are both, right? Both
Yeah.
are both.
But anyway, like I said, thank you though. I really appreciate you inviting me to do this. And
you're very welcome. It's good to see you again too. It's been a minute.
Great. Okay. Well, have a good night, and yay, here we go.
Yeah. Much more. All right. See ya.
Bye.